It's a rainy Wednesday here in Seoul. Hello and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Lee Ji-yoon. Let's first get started with a glimpse of today's highlights. Korea's youth unemployment rate peaked at a 4-month high in May, and adding to this, overall employment conditions still look troublesome. Falling exports and slowing domestic consumption are only a few of the many problems that the Korean economy faces. And we hear from Deputy Director of the IMF's Asia and Pacific Department on what Korea can do to move forward. Korea's job market is showing little signs of improvement as the number of new jobs added last month remained at the 200,000 level for a second straight month. On top of that, the youth unemployment rate is still high. Our Hwang Jae starts us off.
Korea's youth jobless rate for the month of May hit an all-time high. For 4 straight months leading up to that, the unemployment rate for young people ages 15 to 29 had been hitting record highs in each month from previous years. And the trend is unlikely to improve anytime soon.
The employment rate of the younger generation was at 42.7%, which is not that high. So the jobless rate is also rising. This has been the trend for a while and is expected to continue.
While the employment outlook for Korea's young people is pretty bleak, that's not all they'll have to contend with. Overall employment conditions also remained sluggish. Statistics Korea says the number of employed people in the nation stood at around 26.5 million in May, up 261,000 compared to the same month last year. This marks the second straight month where the number of new jobs added has stayed in the 200,000 range. The Finance Ministry expects Korea to continue to add more jobs at a gradual pace. That's thanks to the service industry, which got a boost from government measures like temporary holidays and an extension of consumption tax benefits. The ministry notes, however, that a possible shock from slumping exports and a government-led corporate restructuring drive could further threaten the job market. Hwang Jae, Business Daily.
Korea's import prices rose to a 7-month high in May on the back of a weakening local currency and higher oil prices. According to the Bank of Korea on Wednesday, the import price index was 77.43 last month, up 3.5% from the previous month. The average price of Dubai crude was $44.26 in May, up 13.5% from the previous month. The local currency weakened by 2% against a greenback, pushing up overall import prices. Export prices also gained 2.4% from a month earlier. Korea has failed to rejoin Morgan Stanley Capital International's review list of developed market index candidates after it was excluded back in 2014. The MSCI explained that this is mainly because Korea has not opened offshore markets for its currency, which Seoul contends could increase the won's volatility, and strict identification requirements still remain for foreigners using data from Korea Exchange. Vice Chairman of the Financial Services Commission Chung Eun-bo said Korea will improve its investment environment while maintaining the stability of the foreign currency market. The MSCI also rejected the entry of China's local currency A shares into its benchmark emerging markets index, citing concerns about market accessibility of its shares. But it did say that it would keep the A share proposal for a 2017 review and didn't rule out an off-cycle announcement. As prosecutors continue to raid Lotte Group's companies, the head of the group, who is currently in the U.S., has apologized for causing concern amid the recent embezzlement scandal surrounding the group. Here's our Lee Min-young with more.
Shin Dong-bin, the head of Lotte Group, offered an apology for the slush fund scandal engulfing the group, which is Korea's 5th largest conglomerate.
I'm truly sorry for causing so much concern.
Shin is currently on business in the United States and made the remarks to reporters at a groundbreaking ceremony for a joint venture chemical plant in Louisiana on Tuesday local time. This is the first time he has spoken to the media since prosecutors in Korea launched an investigation into the group for allegations of embezzlement and other financial irregularities. Shin also vowed to fully cooperate with the ongoing investigation, which involved raids on several Lotte offices this week. The investigation and ongoing scandal surrounding Lotte Group have prompted it to postpone its plan for an initial public offering plan for Hotel Lotte. The IPO plan was part of reforms designed to improve the transparency of the group's murky corporate management structure, following a bitter power struggle between Shin Dong-bin and his elder brother Shin Dong-ju. The Lotte chairman said, however, that he would press ahead with a reform plan.
I will try to push ahead with it so that we can see some results by the end of the year.
Meanwhile, the investigation is moving forward. On Tuesday, prosecutors stormed 10 business units, including Lotte Engineering and Construction and Lotte Chemical, as well as 5 other locations in a second raid on Lotte Group. Prosecutors said they are also planning to track the group's real estate transactions for evidence of misconduct, including embezzlement and breach of trust. Lee Min-young, Business Daily.
Illegal Chinese fishing boats have long been a problem for Korean fishermen. And now, with the crab fishing season at its peak, the Korean Coast Guard and military have joined hands with the UN command to patrol the country's waters. Our Lee Joo-young tells us more.
Crab fishing season is at its height, but it has also brought with it fleets of illegal Chinese trawlers in the West Sea, drying up the country's crab resources. According to the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, the country's crab catch reached only 664 tons during the January to April period this year, down almost 70% on year.
Because of illegal Chinese fishing boats near the NLL in the West Sea, our crab catch has been plummeting.
Korea's Coast Guard has seized over 100 Chinese boats so far this year, but they say the sheer number of these illegal vessels in South Korean waters has made it virtually impossible to completely drive them out. And with most ships frequently crossing the de facto maritime border into North Korea when pursued by South Korean patrol forces, tensions can run high and fear this could lead to a skirmish with the North. Recognizing the limits of solely using diplomatic means to curb illegal fishing, Seoul's military, Coast Guard, and United Nations Command commenced joint operations in neutral waters around the Hangang River estuary that lies between the south and north on Friday. This is the first joint operation with the UN since the Korean War ended in an armistice some 60 years ago. Officials say they successfully drove away some 10 Chinese fishing boats which pulled away to North Korean waters after the military police issued warnings. They also seized 2 Chinese vessels earlier in the week and have taken the fishermen into custody. The Coast Guard also said on Wednesday it will deploy 4 warships, 8 speedboats, and a helicopter near the maritime border. Pyongyang, meanwhile, has not made any public comments so far on Seoul's recent crackdown in the area. Lee Joo-young, Business Daily.
As the Korean economy continues to struggle with slumping exports and weak domestic consumption, what are some of the key challenges that lie ahead and how should Korea address them? Our Kim Min-ji sat down with Kalpana Kochhar, Deputy Director in the Asia and Pacific Department in the IMF, for some answers.
Thank you for your time today. So, major economic institutions, including the IMF, have lowered or revised down the global economic outlook. So, what's the IMF's view on the world economy and the Asian economy?
The IMF has lowered growth forecasts again in April this year relative to our forecasts in October last year. And the global recovery we see is rather weak and fragile and quite disappointing. Of greatest concern to us is the fact that trade is slowing, and this actually has major implications for economies in Asia, including Korea. That said, the outlook for Asia is actually quite strong. Asia is forecast to grow at 5.3% this year, 5.3% again next year, and at that rate, Asia's economic growth is higher than any other region's growth by somewhere between 2 and 4%.
So what are some of the biggest challenges facing the world economy and how in nature are these challenges changing, if at all?
So some of the biggest challenges are the fact that the economies that were most impacted by the crisis, namely, especially those in Europe, still haven't completed the process of deleveraging, of reducing debt, and therefore for banks and other financial institutions to begin to lend again and therefore keep the economy growing. The second issue is many of these countries need structural reforms. They need reforms of the labor market to increase employment, to increase productivity, and these are difficult reforms. They often are politically difficult reforms, and I would say these are the two areas in which they've had the most difficulty with policy implementation.
The IMF also cut Korea's economic growth outlook for this year to 2.7% from 2.9%. What are some of the reasons behind this downward revision, and how much does the economic conditions of other countries impact Korea?
So much of the downward revision is because the external environment for Korea is very weak. And as you know, Korea is a very open economy. Its exports contribute a huge amount to the economy. And when the external environment is weak, Korea's economy is definitely impacted. But in addition to that, we have also seen a prolonged weakness in domestic consumption in Korea. For that, there may be some reasons, such as, there was a big crisis of confidence when the ferry accident took place a couple of years ago. There was the MERS, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, that also impacted consumption. In addition, we think there are structural reasons why household savings are rising and people are holding back on consumption. It has to do with uncertainty about their incomes going forward in the future.
Household debt has also been a critical issue for Korea, with levels soaring to record highs. Has the government been addressing the issue appropriately?
Look, there are many structural factors that are contributing to the rise in household debt. One is the aging population. Second is you have a very unique rental market, the Chonsei rental market, that leads to households having to borrow a lot of money to pay up the rent up front. But there have also been some measures that the government took last year by loosening the loan-to-value ratios, etc., that contributed to the increase. Now, they are aware that there could be some risks building. So we are, again, very encouraged by the fact that the government has realized this. And what have they done? They are trying, for example, to get banks and other financial institutions to apply much more stringent criteria before they give people a loan. They are trying to get the financial institutions to take a look at the debt servicing ratio of the household, so taking all the debts of the household into account before they decide how much the household can afford. They are also open to the idea of lowering the debt to income ratio, but they would like to do it gradually so as to not disturb the housing market.
Seoul is currently pushing for a major corporate restructuring drive and has announced that the government and the central bank will together come up with a fund to capitalize state banks. How do you see, what's your take on this issue? Is the government involved too much?
So first and foremost, let me say we strongly welcome the effort to do corporate restructuring. These industries that the government has decided to tackle have excess capacity not only in Korea, but they are globally excess capacity. When you have low trade, these industries are unduly impacted. So for that reason, it's very important that the Korean government has taken the step to both restructure the finances of these companies, but also restructure their operations. When both these companies in these two sectors owe money to the policy banks, and recapitalizing government-owned banks is in fact the government's business. So we are very supportive of the fact that the fiscal authorities have taken the lead, and we recognize that there may be some procedural constraints that may make the fiscal need to move more slowly.
What are some other challenges facing the Korean economy, and what recommendations would the IMF make to address these issues?
So Korea faces some really difficult structural headwinds. One of them is the rapid rate of population aging. The second structural headwind we talked about, many of its corporates are in industries that are exposed to global weakness and global excess capacity. There is a labor market there's duality in the labor market, which means there are some segments of workers that earn high wages and have a protected job, and others that don't. These are all structural headwinds that Korea must solve in order to put the economy on a higher growth path and continue the process of converging to the frontier. Korea went from being at 10% of the US per capita GDP in 1980 to close to 50% now. And the progress seems to have stalled. But that progress must continue, and I think the challenges are structural in nature and difficult. But the good news is that Korea has fiscal space, has space in the government budget to be able to tackle these issues.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
And that wraps it up for today. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Until then, goodbye.